guys, it's Sam, and this is my complete list of all the couples that I read about in 2021 from least favorite to most favorite. This was a video that I typically look forward to every year, and I'm still happy to be doing because I do like talking about books in this way and kind of covering everything in this way because I am someone that does like shipping and couples and romance and books. But this year, much like I talked about in my favorites video and least favorites video and everything, I don't have any standout couples really in either direction. Nothing that I really truly hated in a way that like stuck with me that I wanted to rant about. And then the couples that I really liked, I wouldn't really say any of them were love. I put it in my spreadsheet every year and I rank them from like an all caps no to not all caps no to meh, both yay and nay and meh completely, and then yays, and then all caps yays. And I only had 2 all caps yays, and one of the 2 I was like, in hindsight, I don't know if that stuck with me so much. So yeah, I felt like I had a lot that I could have just kind of brushed over, and the fact that most of these books I don't own, there's 40 couples I'm gonna talk about. I only have like 8 of the books, so I'm gonna have to have so many covers put over here, and that just like is a whole other added editing process. So I hope you guys enjoy this and appreciate that I did this, even though it's for couples that I just feel very mediocre about. If I hadn't written notes, which is why I do this, if I hadn't written notes throughout the year, I wouldn't have remembered most of these. So let's get into it. Least favorite to favorite. So least favorite, and I don't really know if this counts because it's not like you really get to see their relationship, but that's part of the problem, at least in this like first book with the time jumps and whatever. But it's Chami and Paul from Dune. They were my only all caps nay. And I just wrote bleh, insta-love, no buildup. It just kind of is like they're together, and I know the whole point isn't their relationship. This was written a while ago by a guy that probably didn't want to include any romance in his like sci-fi books, whatever. I know later on in the series there's probably, whatever, I don't care. In this first book, they're supposed to be just like very connected, and I do not feel that whatsoever. You get no buildup of their relationship. It's a lot of ick, just like that book was in general. Oh, I lied, I had a second nay, that was all caps. This is Sydney and Sam from the book Wild Love. This is an adult contemporary romance, and what's so about them and that I couldn't really pull for, and this is one of the books that in the future I would have DNF'd if I was going by my current rules. But they are both walking red flags for each other. In addition to that, all of the barriers kind of in their lives are a little bit just like contrived. So as far as the walking red flags, he is faking a relationship for the sake of the courts with his ex, so that she can keep her child. It's not her child with him, but she's been an alcoholic on and off, and when they were not even really together or something, basically she was, I think, a hospice nurse when his mom was dying, and she like helped them and the family. I think this is after they were even together, and now she's about to lose her son because she was irresponsible with her addiction and like wasn't getting help, and so he's staying with her so that the courts think that she has someone like stable in her life, but she's not even really living there. It's very odd. And then when Sydney comes to town, she's drinking too much because she's just been cheated on by her partner, and she's like going out and drinking a lot. So the fact that they're like connecting at all when she's this sort of walking red flag to him as like a potential alcoholic because he doesn't know her, and then he has this stuff that's like keeping him away, and the whole town is in on the fact that he's like faking this relationship, and is like, you need to do right by the woman that you're faking the relationship with, but they're not even together. Like, it's just a mess. Also, one of the worst sex scenes is in this book because they end up having sex like outside in the upstate New York winter, and I kept sitting there like not knowing the logistics. Like, I live in Chicago, it's pretty fucking cold. It's probably similar coldness to upstate New York, and I'm like, who would want to do that in like negative temperatures? They have to like pull off their snow pants. Like, it's ridiculous. So yeah, did not like this. Then we have Karina and Malik from A Song of Race and Ruin. This is the first book in a YA fantasy, I want to say duology, potentially trilogy. I could not tell you most things about this book. This was one of the first books that I read in 2021, and I don't remember it. 2021 just bloop, plucked it out of my brain. But according to my notes, it was very insta-lovey, and my notes did say that they meet once, and then both of them are sort of talking about like giving up everything for each other and potentially giving up their quests and like stuff about their family like for each other. So yeah, definitely very insta-lovey. Then we have A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair with Hades and Persephone. The fact that I had to have Hades Persephone so low on this list is a atrocity. This is when we're getting into the meh nay category because I didn't like absolutely hate this. However, it's still not great. This iteration of Persephone is really frustrating, and the whole story relies on miscommunication and her just like believing the worst in him all the time. Also, everything leads to sex for them that like really doesn't make sense. Like, she's supposed to not trust him, like even from the get-go. They don't really know each other, and then they just end up like having sex really quickly, and then she ends up being like, but I don't trust him, he did this bad thing, and then he's like, I didn't do that thing, and she's like, oh, okay, and he really didn't do the thing. But like the fact that she just believes everything that she's told is ridiculous. And then you do just have the problem that I don't like with a lot of Hades Persephone retellings these days, and I don't know why they're doing this, because they're both gods and they're both immortal, so like, why do you make her so much younger than him? Like, all the other gods are immortal and Persephone is always like, I'm 18 or 19, and it's like, why? They're all immortal. They're all like, make her also thousands of years old, but maybe just less. Maybe she's 2,000 years old and he's 4 to 5, you know. But at that point, does it really matter? You know, like, but why are you making it like, ugh, like he's this immortal being and she's only now just 19, like, just ick. Then we have Incendiary by Zoraida Cordova and Des and Renata. And with these two, this is a book that I didn't really like anyway. I put it in one of my least favorites of the year. But we don't get to see a lot of them to make it actually believable, and it's a lot of telling instead of showing. So we're just told like how much they care about each other and like their feelings, but we don't really get to see them together showing their feelings, you know? Then Sheetal and Dev from Star Daughter. This was just a very forgettable teen romance. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, but this whole book was just like so forgettable and so mediocre to me, and the romance was the same, and it was just, again, like, they have this history, so it wasn't the worst, like they were dating before the book started, but their romance had absolutely no depth to it at all. Then Talia, and I don't even know his name because I couldn't find it, and I've gotten rid of the book, From the Glass Magician by Caroline Stevermer. This is an adult standalone where our main character finds out that she has magic, and she's sort of like a shapeshifter. But the guy is also a shapeshifter, and he's only really interested in her after he finds out that she has magic and that she's a shapeshifter. So I'm just kind of like, there's really like no depth to that, and it's really hard to pull for them when he's only really interested in that. And it's not even for like power reasons. I mean, I guess they're in like the same class of people then. All of it is just kind of ick. Then we have Ruby and Spencer from I Hate You More. This is an adult contemporary romance where she is trying to show a dog in his dog show. And so they have this like enemies to like lovers thing because she's all like brash and in his face and shouldn't be showing this dog because it's not a show dog, and he's very like goes by the rules, whatever. They get together too quickly for this like slow burn thing, and then the miscommunication in the third act was just like overdone, and it was unnecessary because they kind of had already had a miscommunication, and then there was almost like a second one that didn't need to happen. But the biggest thing that actually stands out to me about this, similar to what I talked about earlier with Wild Love and the sex scene, this one had a mutual masturbation scene across the room. They hadn't done anything at that point, anything else, and they have this like mutual masturbation scene, and then it's almost like they're together after that, and it's like, y'all haven't even kissed. And like immediately after, they go to see his parents, not like as a couple. I forget like what the reasoning is for them going to see his parents and like her going with, but like, what? So like the 0 to 60 is so intense in this book. Then we're getting into the just plain mediocre, the middle of the road meh. And we have Lore and Castor from Lore by Alexander Bracken. This is surprising that it's actually in the middle of the list because the book itself is awful and was my only 1-star read of the year. But like so much of the book, this just had no depth. So these were childhood friends to lovers. And just, there was no depth there. Like, completely forgettable. I could not tell you one interaction. Granted, I have just dumped most of this book into the abyss because I don't want to remember it, but like, nothing. I could not tell you a single thing about them. Then we have Jordan and Nick, plus a smattering of others from The Chosen and the Beautiful by Niveau. This is a Gatsby retelling, but Jordan and Nick are together at certain points because those are the characters that are together. Like, she's bisexual and most of the characters are bisexual. With this, there's just really like no real connection to any of her lovers, and again, it's not really the point. The point wasn't really the relationships here, but I was hoping for like a little bit more depth in the connections to the characters and things in this retelling, because you don't really get that with Gatsby either, like the original, but you just didn't get that. So it was all these like couples doing coupley things and like, you know, flapper era and whatever, and there was just like no connection there. Then we have the Kindred Spirit Supper Club with Ray and Sabrina. These two don't make a lot of sense because he's initially like really attracted to her and I could not tell you why. Like the amount of excuses sort of he makes for her as someone that he doesn't know, when she's a complete stranger, just doesn't make sense and was not believable, and so I couldn't really connect to them or like pull for them because I was just like, why do you like her? Not that she was a bad character, it was just like he had no reason as a character to be so invested. Then we have Enjoy the View by Sarah Morgenthaler with Easton and River. This is, I believe, the last of the Sarah Morgenthaler books that I'm going to read because I've read now 3 of them and they're all really far too long, have no spice in them for a book that is so long, and then the characters get together way too soon, and so any of the conflict feels just very contrived. My notes literally are, meh, get together too soon, and I was bored. This is another situation where I don't think they have sex, but they do, they're going up and like climbing in a mountain in Alaska, and there's a lot of just like dumb shit that happens that would have honestly had someone like getting killed if this was real. And I don't know if they hook up on the mountain, but if they do, it's another situation where it's like, it's -40 up there. Like, absolutely not. I'm not sure if they hook up or just like maybe make out or something, but like, yikes. Also, they're up there for like weeks and like would be super smelly. I don't know. It's just like, no, it's not romantic. Then we have That the Shoe Fits by Julia Murphy with Henry and Cindy. And this is a Cinderella sort of retelling with our main character who's plus size going on this bachelor type show. And so he's the bachelor. And I should have known that I wasn't going to like this one because I just am predisposed to not like bachelor men on a show like that. And I don't like The Bachelor either. But the bachelor setting made it so that they also really didn't get to spend much time together. So it was one of those situations about like, why do they even like each other? They do get a chance to meet sort of, again, like a Cinderella. Like they meet when they don't know anything about the other and then they end up on the show together. But it was still like, you don't see them together. Most of their time is spent apart. And then she's just, because it's not in his POV at all, it's just her POV. She's left feeling like, does he like me? Does he not? You know, he has to go on all these dates with other women. Like, and it's just, I don't like it. I don't like it, but this is gonna be like a companion series of like plus size leads, fairy tale retellings in like rom-coms, which I will continue to read because I like that vibe, but just like Cinderella and Bachelor together, it works, but like not for me. Then we have Sweet and Bitter Magic with Ren and Tamsin. This was fine. This was a sapphic romance, but I felt really neutral about their like growing feelings for each other, and I found them really forgettable again. I have like flashes of things that I can remember about like scenes, and but not really. Like it's mostly gone from my brain, which is again why they're in the meh category. I have no strong feelings either way, which is why my brain has mostly dumped it. Then we have The Last Goodbye with Anna and Brody. This is when I realized that I don't really like, what are they called? Episcopal romances? I forget the name. Where characters aren't really together and they're communicating mostly via like phone or letters or something. In this case, it's phone. She ends up calling his number because it's the number of her husband who passed away, or fiance or boyfriend, I forget if they were married or not. But finally his phone got switched off and it switched to somebody else, and so she contacts this guy and they end up like forming this like unlikely friendship, but they both have a lot of stuff going on. She has her grief, he's dealing with some severe mental health things, and they never really, like till the very end, get to meet. So it's almost like a Sleepless in Seattle thing, but in like that movie, I don't know, movies work better for that for me, but with this, like, is when I realized that I really need my characters to be interacting at some point. For example, I love the ships passing in the night trope, but that's where you get to see them come together multiple times over a long period of time. With these two, I think they were talking for like possibly a couple of years and like never meet, so you're just having these like phone calls, and I'm like, y'all don't even know if you like each other. Phone calls is not enough. So yeah. Then we have April May and Maya from the Carls Duology by Hank Green. I really liked how these two balance each other out. It's a nice sapphic romance. However, you don't get to see much of them, especially until the second book, and it's not even the main focus really of the story. So like their relationship isn't really like a main plot point. But I did end up liking them, especially as a series that kind of focuses on character flaws and things. It does a lot for sort of like, not redemption arcs, but you get to sort of see why some of the characters put up with April May in the first book, because it's only in her POV in the first book when you get everyone else's POV in the second, and Maya's is one of those. Then we have All the Feels by Olivia Dade with Lauren and Alex. This is cute because they are a couple that's in their like older 30s, I want to say. I want to say he's like almost 40 and she's maybe mid 30s, which I like seeing couples like that are a little bit older in their 30s, since I'm in my 30s. But they both acted a bit immature in a way that made me be like, these people are acting like people in their 20s, so like why even bother putting them in their 30s? And then especially him, and he does have ADHD, but I felt like leaning into the ADHD so much made him, again, just like very immature in a way that almost felt like stereotypical. So I wasn't pulling for them as much as I had hoped to. And then we have The Two Lives of Lydia Byrd by Josie Silver. This has two couples, Lydia and Freddie and Lydia and Jonah. What I liked about this book is this is a like grief story. Lydia is married to Freddie, or they're engaged. Again, I've read a couple of grief stories. I'm forgetting like where all they fall. But he ends up passing away, but then she ends up having these either like dreams, or she's going into an alternate reality while she sleeps where he's still alive. And so she gets to kind of live her life without him and then see what their lives would have been like if he would have survived. And so it shows us like multiple sides of love thing. Jonah was one of their mutual friends that she knew first back in childhood, and it sort of throughout the story starts to hint that like maybe they could have been together if she never would have gotten with Freddie. And then it kind of veers away from that for a while, and I thought it wasn't going to go in that direction, and then towards the end it kind of veers back to like he's another sort of like option for her in the life where Freddie isn't alive. And then again shows multiple dimensions to Freddie as not being this like perfect person just because he died and all this stuff. So I liked that it wasn't like idealizing love and showed like very realistic sides of like all of that, but ultimately with both couples you didn't really get to see a lot of them together, so it's hard for me to like truly ship it. Okay, now we're getting into like the meh yay. So like it's a little bit better, but like still not great, but a little bit better. We have A Certain Appeal with Bennett and Darcy, and this was a modern Pride and Prejudice retelling that was taking place in a burlesque club, and I really liked how that was done. However, some of the parts that were Pride and Prejudice were like so good because there were some scenes that were adapted like so well to this like modern setting, but it wasn't slow burn enough for Pride and Prejudice, and that's a huge bummer. And there were some things that were changed, like some of the plot points were similar, but like things were changed, like they knew what the other one was doing a little bit too much. So it kind of ruined it, because like the whole point of Pride and Prejudice is the slow burn, and if you take that away, it just like ruins it. Then we have Anne and Keen from Float Plan. This was another grief story. At the beginning of the year I was reading a lot of women who have lost their husbands or fiancés or whatever. So in this one she has lost her, I think, fiance, I want to say, or maybe it was her husband, and she ends up going on like this boating trip and she needs to hire a guide and he becomes her guide. What I really liked is it was like really cute and very supportive of each other, like both of their goals and things, as I got to know each other, and it was like very sort of slow in the build up. But any tension they have is after they confess their love to each other, like literally their love to each other. So it cheapens it a bit, because it's like, no, you guys have already done that. Like if you're gonna do the tension thing, do it like before the, like, yeah. So it just kind of ruined this tension piece of like, will they, won't they, because it's like, I mean, you know that they will because it's a romance book, but you know, like the ordering of how things went could have been really different. I would have liked it more, I think. Then we have To Love and to Loathe with Diana and Jeremy. This is a cute little Regency romance, and they were sort of like friends as kids, and they have this like bantery, not really hate to love, but she kind of feels like she hates him, but like she really doesn't. It's really forgettable, but it was super cute when I read it. I think they have to like, they aren't fake dating because she's a widow, so she's kind of allowed to do what she wants, but like they're supposedly sort of like fake hooking up to help his reputation and to help her so that more men will approach her, apparently. But then they end up falling for each other, obviously. Then we have The Road Trip with Addie and Dylan. This is a second chance romance where we're getting flashbacks to when they were together originally, and now they are stuck in a car on a road trip to a wedding of a mutual friend. And so there's all this drama and stuff. The problem with this one is that Beth O'Leary's books tend to lean more women's fiction anyway, but you don't really get to see them together and happy even in the past. So you have all this stuff in the past of like how they sort of broke up and how they didn't work out and how they weren't good for each other, and I still kind of pulled for them in the present, oddly enough, but it was still like, because there was just like a lot of like angst and tension, but it was still like, why do you guys like each other? Like, why do you want to be together? There was no real indication of why they wanted to be together besides this like overwhelming nostalgia for how they met over the summer in France, but it was never like a really good relationship. So this is a second chance romance where I'm kind of like, you shouldn't have gotten back together, really. But I still sort of pulled for it, and I just like love second chance, so I guess it's like a thing for me. But yeah, they were still like, I pulled for it, but I don't know why. Okay, now we're getting into the yays. Now we're safely in the yays. Do you see how much romance I read last year and why I'm not doing that again this year? Because my favorite ships don't tend to be from romance books. This year they are, because I read so many romance, but like, that's where my downfall was with the shipping. Next we have Katura and Lord Death from the book Katura and Lord Death. And in this, a young woman falls in love with Death, both literally as a figure, because it's Lord Death, and thematically, and it's really beautifully done. It's a nice, like, sort of fairy tale-esque story, and yeah, the way that it's blending that, like, her falling in love with a person, but her also falling in love with, like, a concept is really cool. Then we have Isaac and Violet from Deck of Omens by Christine Lynn Herman. This is a second book in the duology, and I think I mentioned a lot of the couples in there in the first book as well, but everyone in here is bisexual, so there's multiple couples I could mention, but they're like the main one. Everyone's bisexual, both of these characters are bisexual, and they're just cute disaster bisexuals, and I love them, and they're all overcoming like trauma together and whatever, so I really like that. In addition to that, there's another couple that is in the series that don't get a happily ever after, so I don't really want to go into it necessarily, but I like even how that couple was like done and resolved, because it's not a romance book, it's a fantasy series, so you can have that like not working out situation, but I like that these two broken people came together, these two bisexuals, and then the other two, how that was resolved was also really good. Now we have a little love triangle to talk about with Bree, Nick, and Sel from Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This is one that I was initially ambivalent about. I was initially ambivalent because Bree and Nick kind of get together like pretty quick, and so it's kind of like, what's going on here? And then it started to twist a little bit, and it started to feel a little bit like the Vampire Diaries, and I will tell you that I've always been a Damon and Elena fan. So then I sort of started to get the vibes of like when Elena's still sort of with Stefan, but Damon is like there, and maybe that's more of a connection, like that energy. So I was starting to get a little bit intrigued, and then there's something that happens at the end that starts to make the almost insta-love between her and Nick make more sense, and make me almost kind of like pull for that too. And then she has really good tension with Sel as well. So I love all of it. I love a good love triangle, and this is good because there's some circumstances that make it much more like believable and interesting and compelling. So yeah, I'm into it. That group could have probably been higher on the list than it was, so just consider them a little bit higher than some of the ones I'm about to mention. We have Well Matched by Jen DeLuca with Mitch and April. I said a lot of things that were cute, but ultimately was pretty disappointing to me because I've been shipping this couple since they were mentioned in the first book, and then like this one was a bit of a disappointment. But there's a lot of tropes that are like a little bit more interesting and that you don't get to see a ton of. You have an older single mom, she's not like old, but she's like 40, and I think he's about to turn 30, with like a younger guy. He's a himbo, but she's very avoidant with her feelings, or like sort of not seeing her own feelings, like stubborn with admitting her feelings, and that makes everything drag when they start getting together like pretty quick, and it becomes very obvious what his feelings are, and she's just being like almost intentionally dense about it. But I ultimately did still pull for them. So there's kind of a lot of different things going on with like friends to lovers, but they're friends as adults, they weren't friends as like kids, and like he's a sweet himbo or whatever. He's like perfect book boyfriend. Then we have The Heir of Novron by Michael J. Sullivan with Hadrian and Arista, and Eliana and Sir Brecton, and these are just like side couples that aren't super important to the plot, but particularly Hadrian and Arista are a very like slow burn throughout the series. Like you sort of start to see it, but you're not sure if it's really gonna happen. And again, it's not like a huge spoiler to the series if you do figure out that they're gonna get together. Like you kind of know it's gonna go in that direction. And then the second couple is just like a little side couple, and it's just two really sweet beings that get together. Like he's a very, very noble knight, and she's a former servant that got elevated to nobility, and they're sweet. Then we have Emma and Talia from Paybacks the Witch by Lana Harper. This is a cute little bisexual sapphic romance between two witches. I loved it. One of the witches has like death magic. That's really all I needed to know to like it. Then we have Alex and Poppy from People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. These are adults, friends to lovers. They become friends as adults. They're traveling together over the years, and they slowly realize that they have feelings for each other, and so we get a mix of like a current trip that they're on after something big happened, and you kind of know like a little bit of what happened, and then you get like flashbacks to some of the stuff that happened with them over the years. I still pulled for them, even though their miscommunication at times was like really dumb. This book is really one of those books that could have been solved by the two characters just talking, but they don't. But I still pulled for them. Then we have Actor Age Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert with Eve and Jacob. These are two characters who are both on the autism spectrum, and so that made their communication so much like deeper because they both had a more blunt communication style, and so that really worked for them. There was less of that sort of like miscommunication happening. This is also the Grump and Ray of Sunshine trope, which I always tend to like. He was a little intense at times, like once they did start falling for each other, he was a little bit intense, but it also made sense for him why he was that way. Then we have Luella and Eldest from A Deal with the Elf King. This is one that I'm like kind of surprised because when I read this book, I think I gave it, maybe I gave it 3 stars. I wouldn't say it's like the best book. However, I read it back in February and I still kind of like it. I still kind of think about it. I'm gonna continue with the series. I know a lot of people said the series is garbage and I'm kind of okay, like yeah, but it's sort of like my garbage a little bit. Like I'm not obsessed, but this couple, I kind of liked it. I read it for a Hayes and Persephone vlog. They're a little bit more Beauty and the Beast, but he's an elf, she's a human. And what's nice about it, what I really like is it's sort of like an enemies to lovers, but they also have opposite kinds of magic. Like he has more of like a death magic and she has a nature magic. And I love shit like that. Like I love when their magic has to like sort of combine or whatever. So I dug this actually. And I end up really kind of liking them and pulling for them. I know, but like the actual plot of the story, like whatever. But it's a fantasy romance, so you're supposed to be there for the romance anyway. Then we have Zoya and Nikolai from Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. There's also, Hannah and Nina in this book as well. I liked this book more than the first book in the series, and I liked Nikolai and Zoya more as a couple. I kind of like got some time to adjust to them as a couple. But I do struggle with the fact that Leigh has fallen into the trap that so many YA authors do, in that everybody gets together at the end of her books. Like why do all the characters that know each other have to get together? You know? Everyone pairs up. And so even the fact that I like Nikolai and Zoya, the fact that like some of the 2 only remaining single characters are the ones that hook up. Yeah, I still really liked them though in this, much more than I did in the first one. Then we have Sabrin and Eid from The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This is a wonderful sapphic romance between 2 really strong women who are stronger together, but also strong as individuals. And it's the guard and the royal trope. And I love the guard and the royal trope. And we have a bunch of characters from Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare. For Cordelia and James, these 2 are almost like a second chance, and they are fake married, but they actually both really love each other, but there's some circumstances keeping them apart, so they both don't know, they both think it's unrequited, but it's not, so it's super angsty. Then we have Thomas and Alistair, who were like enemies to sort of like lovers to like enemies again to maybe lovers again, so kind of like second chance angst with that. Then we have Ariadne and Anna, who are a similar vibe but sapphic, 2 angsty lesbians. Are they gonna get back together? Are they not? Then we have Grace and Christopher teased as a couple, which are just 2 nerds who could potentially be in love with each other. And then Lucy and Jesse, who I mentioned last year because I read the first book last year, that like I'm still not completely sure about them because he's much older than her, but he's a ghost, he died. So he's kind of like stuck at his age. However, like he still has been around for that long, so I don't know, like that kind of, I'm not sure. But the way that he's tied to her because of her powers, because she has sort of like these necromantic abilities, I kind of dig that. So ultimately I enjoyed like all of these couples, and they're all an angst factory, like nothing is completely happy here. Then we have Witch Shadow by Susan Dennard. Shocked that this isn't higher on the list, but again, because of the content of this book, it couldn't be higher on the list. So for one, we did not have enough Aduin and Azul content in this for me to put this higher, because they are my favorite couple, but we got like hardly any of them. There's a couple other couples like teased a little bit, but nothing that I can really like talk about with a lot of substance. But there's a lot of angst between one sapphic couple, Vivian and Vanessa, that I really liked. It was really good. Then we have Anna and Quan from The Heart Principle. This is a lovely, sweet, supportive hookup to something more, because they originally meet because she goes on like a Tinder or something after her boyfriend says he wants to be in an open relationship, and so she starts trying to find a one-night stand, but she's autistic, and so she's really not able to do one-night stands just because of the way that like she connects with people and whatever, and so they end up forming this like bigger bond than that and keep hanging out without hooking up and like getting closer. And he's just like a sweet guy that looks like a bad boy, but like he's really not. This would be higher, except for this book wasn't really romance focused and was much more like women fiction, a lot of like really heavy topics in it, so you didn't get to see as much of their relationship as I would have liked to. Then I'm not sure this is super fair to include, because what even are they? But Gideon and Harrow from Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. In my notes I literally said, does this even count? What are they? because they're not together. But they are, I don't know. I just feel like I had to put it on there as like, I do ship it, it's very up there, but like, what is this? What is this? Then we have Adam and Olive from The Love Hypothesis by Ellie Hazelwood. This is very hyped, so I'm sure many of you know about it, and it's been on many a list. But this is slow burn fake dating within the STEM field that was super sweet, but it was slightly over the top at the end. Like the end conflict was a little bit much for me, and like a little bit too much of like not being sure about their feelings to be like so sure about their feelings. It was like a little bit over the top, but overall I loved most of this. Then I have only two couples that were in the all caps yay category. The first is Brendan and Annie from Hang the Moon. These two are so cute. He's the younger brother of the lead character in the first book. It's a companion series. He's the younger brother, and then the girl, Annie, is the main character from the first book's like best friend. And he's had a crush on Annie throughout like their entire childhood. I think he's only like 2 years younger than her. He's a super hopeless romantic, and he started a dating app because of this, and she's sort of like, she hasn't given up on love, but she's just like very skeptical about it. And so he's a little bit trying to convince her that like love still exists, but obviously they end up falling for each other. I related to her character in particular a lot, and I just really liked them. Like it was really cute to see her being the more skeptical one, but not in a way that was annoying, and him being like the hopeless romantic, but also not in a way that was annoying. I really liked their dynamic. And then my favorite couple of the year is Noelle and Sam from 8 Perfect Hours by Leah Louise, which is a book that I've mentioned as one of my favorite books. This is a realistic fated lovers scenario. Super swoony. This is two ships passing in the night kind of dynamic. They meet while stuck on the highway in the UK. I forget which highway, like the big one, whatever. Some of you are gonna laugh at me for saying that. They get stuck in a snowstorm. They end up sitting in each other's like car together while they're like waiting. They don't know each other, they're strangers. And then he's actually American. They go their separate ways, and then their paths keep crossing over the years. And then they discover that there's something else sort of connecting them as well. Like it's not supernatural or anything, but they both have some things like going on in their own personal lives that they don't realize also like overlap as well. So I really liked them. I was like pulling from them the whole time, like chest aching, that whole thing. Really into them, but I'm typically speaking really into any ships passing in the night romance that does it well. That is it for all the couples I read about in 2021. Like I said, as this has been repeated throughout all my videos, you see how romance did me so dirty. You would think that since I read a ton of romance books, that I have had so many couples I would love. No. In fact, no. Traditionally, I have looked back at my older videos and I have shipped couples from fantasy books and sci-fi books the most. So this year, since I'm leaning on that, hopefully that will help me with both my favorites videos for 2022 as well as my couples video for 2022. Right now, I have yet to pick up a romance book this year. I mean, I know it hasn't been that long, a couple weeks. And I'm not saying I'm canceling all romance. Like, no, absolutely. It's not the romance's fault. It was my fault. So I'm just taking a little breaky break, getting into some of my fantasy books so I can find my fantasy couples that I love. Wish me luck. But comment below, let me know some of your favorite and least favorite couples of the year, particularly from books that you think I should read that I haven't yet, because I want some more couples to ship, please and thank you. So thank you all for watching. I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.